Welcome back to Cinematic Century Chronicle, where we explore at least one film from every year between 1920 and 2020. Today we return to 1925, when Hollywood was still discovering how far visual storytelling could go. With The Phantom of the Opera, Universal Pictures built one of the most elaborate sets in silent film history to bring Gaston Leroux's 1910 novel to life through spectacle, set design, and visual storytelling. This is The Phantom of the Opera, directed by Rupert Julian, starring Lon Chaney as the Phantom and Mary Philbin as Christine. Just a note before we begin, this video contains spoilers. The Phantom of the Opera is widely available and worth experiencing for its atmosphere, craftsmanship, and Chaney's performance. If you haven't seen it yet, it's worth checking out. Few silent films demonstrate Hollywood's growing ambition better than The Phantom of the Opera. Universal Pictures invested heavily in the production, constructing one of the largest indoor sets of the silent era on Stage 28 at Universal City. Designed by French art director Ben Carré, the Opera House interior was modeled after the Palais Garnier in Paris, using sketches and architectural references to reproduce its distinctive balconies, arches, and grand staircase. The set included functioning doors, stairways, trap mechanisms, and a massive chandelier suspended from reinforced steel beams, all built to handle the weight of hundreds of extras during the film's grand scenes. Stage 28 remained in active use for nearly 90 years, hosting productions ranging from Dracula, 1931, to late 20th century features. When it was finally demolished in 2014, historians called it one of the last surviving physical links to silent-era studio craftsmanship. Within that setting, The Phantom of the Opera unfolds as both a story and a performance. Christine, a young singer at the Paris Opera, believes she's being guided by a heavenly angel of music. The voice she hears, however, belongs to the Phantom, a disfigured man who haunts the catacombs beneath the theater. The contrast between the ornate opera house and the Phantom's underground lair forms the film's core visual idea. Above ground, the world is illuminated, elegant, and filled with music. Below, it's silent, claustrophobic, and ruled by obsession. The movie's design makes that duality visible, light and darkness built into the architecture itself. Cinematographer Charles Van Enger shot the opera house scenes with layered compositions and deep staging, filling the frame with dancers, stagehands, and spectators to create a sense of movement and depth. The Phantom's domain, by contrast, is lit sparsely, pools of light surrounded by shadow. Every detail of the production, from the crowded opera house to the shadows below it, reinforces one of the film's central idea, that beauty and horror occupy the same space, separated only by light. Rupert Julian was assigned to helm the project. From the beginning, production was tense. Julian reportedly clashed with Lon Chaney. Cinematographer Charles Van Enger later recalled that Julian and Chaney had a difficult working relationship and often refused to speak directly, passing notes or relaying instructions through others. Julian's first cut was completed in early 1925 and previewed for test audiences in Los Angeles. The response was poor. Viewers found the pacing slow and the tone inconsistent, veering between mystery, melodrama, and horror. Universal pulled the film from release and ordered extensive reshoots. A second version was then assembled under the supervision of Edward Sedgwick and Ernst Lemmel. This cut emphasized lighter moments and added comic relief, but audiences again reacted negatively. It was never widely released. Finally, Universal editor Maurice Pivar and director Lois Weber were brought in to salvage the project. They combined scenes from both previous cuts, removed most of the comedic material, and restructured the story to focus more clearly on the Phantom and Christine. This third version became the film's official 1925 release. Several foreign versions were also created for export markets, each using slightly different edits and tinting patterns. Because the original negatives were later lost or damaged, modern restorations rely on piecing together surviving material from these different prints. Rather than a single definitive edition, The Phantom of the Opera exists today as a reconstruction drawn from multiple sources, a reminder that many silent films were not preserved in their original form, and that what survives often represents a blend of creative decisions from several hands rather than one. Lon Chaney's work on The Phantom of the Opera cemented his legacy as one of cinema's most inventive performers. Nicknamed the Man of a Thousand Faces, Lon Chaney was known for designing and applying his own makeup using a mix of prosthetics, grease paint, and handmade devices. For the Phantom of the Opera, he created the illusion of a skull-like face with hollowed cheeks, pulled-back nostrils reportedly held in place by wire, and carefully layered cotton and collodion to shape the contours of exposed bone. The materials and methods he used would be considered unsafe by modern standards, but they allowed him to achieve effects that were otherwise impossible in the 1920s. He kept his methods secret. Makeup artists weren't allowed to assist, and he often arrived on set already in character. The reveal of his unmasked face was reportedly so shocking during previews that some audience members screamed or fainted. What makes Chaney's performance enduring isn't just the makeup, it's how he moves. The Phantom's gestures are exaggerated yet controlled, alternating between menace and despair. His movements express what his face cannot: longing, anger, isolation. The unmasking scene remains one of silent cinema's most effective moments. When Christine tears away the mask, the camera holds just long enough for the horror to register. The cut doesn't rely on editing tricks, it's a pure reaction shot. The image became an early benchmark for visual shock, proving that fear could be conveyed entirely through framing and timing. The film's most famous sequence, the falling chandelier, represents silent Hollywood's mastery of scale and illusion. When the Phantom's demands are ignored, he cuts the chain supporting the massive chandelier, sending it crashing into the audience below. The prop was large and heavy, constructed from metal and glass, and the Opera House set was reinforced to support both the rigging and the hundreds of extras seated beneath it. To achieve the illusion of the chandelier breaking loose and striking the crowd, Universal combined full-scale shots with miniature effects and quick editing. The impact itself was simulated through cuts between the falling model and the reactions of the audience on the full-size set. Trade publications at the time promoted the scene as one of the film's major attractions, emphasizing its cost and complexity. What makes the sequence effective isn't its destruction, but its structure. The alternating viewpoints, from the Phantom's control booth above to the panic below, create tension without needing sound or special effects. It's an early example of how editing and perspective could transform a stage stunt into one of the silent era's most memorable moments. For all its scale, The Phantom of the Opera is still a work of Gothic atmosphere, a film where lighting and color define tone as much as performance. Universal incorporated both tinted reels and early two-color Technicolor sequences to support the film's mood. The most famous use of color appears in the masquerade sequence where the Phantom arrives dressed in vivid red, one of the earliest surviving examples of Technicolor in a major studio release. One of my favorite sequences is the rooftop scene, tinted entirely in blue. The contrast between that cool tint and the bold red of the Phantom's costume from the earlier Masquerade stands out as one of the film's strongest visual choices. In that same sequence, the Phantom crouches on top of an angel statue, watching Christine and Raoul from above. The image captures his self-image perfectly, a man who sees himself as elevated, even divine, yet remains cut off from the world below. The pairing of the deep blue tone and the statue's symbolism illustrates what makes Phantom such a distinct work of Gothic cinema: beauty and isolation rendered through light, color, and form rather than words. Color in The Phantom of the Opera isn't simply decorative, it defines emotion. The red of the Phantom's costume and the blue of the rooftop work as emotional opposites: passion and detachment, obsession and distance. Those contrasts give the film its Gothic identity, where feeling comes through imagery and design instead of dialogue. Nearly a century later, The Phantom of the Opera remains one of silent cinema's most recognizable works. Its influence is visible in multiple directions. For Universal Pictures, it laid the groundwork for the studio's horror identity, leading directly to Dracula, 1931, Frankenstein, 1931, and The Mummy, 1932. For film history, it demonstrated that large-scale design and emotional storytelling could coexist in genre filmmaking. This film helped define one of horror's enduring archetypes, the tragic monster, a figure whose horror emerges not from evil but from isolation. The story itself has never disappeared. It's been remade and reinterpreted repeatedly. From the 1943 Claude Rains version to Hammer's 1962 film, from Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise, 1974, to Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical and its 2004 film adaptation. Each version adjusts the balance between romance and horror, but all trace their lineage back to Chaney's portrayal and Universal's production design. For film students, Phantom is a reminder that technical innovation and emotional storytelling have always been linked. Its makeup, lighting, and editing choices were not just artistic flourishes, they were practical solutions to storytelling challenges in a medium still finding its language. The Phantom of the Opera stands as one of the first Hollywood films to merge horror, romance, and Gothic spectacle into a single vision. Its vaulted sets, shadowed corridors, and contrasts of beauty and decay turned architecture into emotion. It showed that fear could be conveyed through structure and lighting, and that a monster could elicit sympathy without a word of dialogue. Next time on Cinematic Century Chronicle, we'll travel to Japan in 1926 for Teinosuke Kinugasa's A Page of Madness, a film that pushes silent cinema to its psychological limits through fragmented imagery and experimental form. Subscribe and join me as we continue to chronicle 100 years of film, one story at a time. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.